Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Game Master Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today I'm going to be taking the channel's first look at the player's manual of Hyperborea 3rd edition. Now, this is the 3rd edition of the very well known and praised Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, which is originally, I believe it came out in 2012. So I don't know if it was kickstarted initially prior to that. So it was a little bit before my time of coming back to the tabletop role playing hobby. I was still very much immersed in 2012 with massively multiplayer online role playing games, as well as other computer role playing games and such. And so, as I started coming back into the tabletop role playing hobby, um, which was around 2014 or 15 ish, I was already, um, looking um, at the time, I think around 2014, 15 was when the Kickstarter for Conan 2D20 from Modiphius, when that Kickstarter was running, I certainly backed that around that time frame. And so this, Hyperborea was basically not on my radar until I think immediately after the um, the second Kickstarter was done, the second edition Kickstarter was done, and I had kind of missed out on that, or I was just distracted looking at the slew of other things that I was in the process of buying and running and even playing, and so when the third edition came around and was announced initially, I was like, all right, I am not going to miss this. I am definitely going to back this thing and get it because I've heard nothing but good things about this game system. And so, without further ado, I'm going to take this is mostly an introduction, but I am going to take a look at the initial portion of the game book for the player's manual. I picked up the collector's edition, so it's this the second manual, which is the game master's manual, and then an atlas, which I have a physical copy of the atlas, and then some other odds and ends because I did back, at a fairly high pledge level. I'm not quite recalling exactly what it was, probably around like 120 or so. So I certainly backed it at a higher level and certainly well worth every penny on it because the books are absolutely gorgeous, and I really can't wait to actually dig into this, and certainly can't wait to play it. This is something that I've seen at the larger conventions. It's always being run. All right. And even at the moderate size conventions that I've been to over these last 12 months, let's say, there's always been at least one table, if not two, running this game system. So, that's another reason why I want to start focusing on this on the channel because this is a very popular game. And if you start going to conventions, now that conventions are starting to sprout up again, um, I can almost guarantee you're going to see this game system being run at least one table and probably more when you get there. So, without further ado, let's start taking a look at Hyperborea 3rd edition, the player's manual, the very initial introduction. So here we have it, and you can already see something that's going to catch your eye. Hopefully, is that it's sword, sorcery, and weird science fantasy. All right, so that's something that you might not have been expecting, and I'm certainly even more excited about it because of um, that situation, because of that genre. So I'm really interested in it. And this is all by Jeffrey Talanian. Um, and we're going to move on. And so here's all the credits and everything. Cover art is by Charles Lang. Color plate art is by Lang and David Miller, Peter Mullen, Val Zemeckis, and with Daisy Bingham. Interior art, just tons of people. Ian Bagley, Bingham, sorry, Jonathan Bingham, Mike Furnett, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to spend too much time in here. Some of these names you're probably very familiar with as you go through them. And then cartography is by Glenn Seal. Layout is by Jeffrey Talanian. And then they go through the acknowledgments. And the acknowledgments are, of course, the fantastic literature of Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, Clark Ashton Smith. All right, so you just hit my favorite author, my second favorite author, and Clark Ashton Smith is considered one of the better follows of Robert E. Howard. In other words, he kind of had an understanding of the genre and his stories really do hold up very, very well, and his theme and just his presentation. Then you get into the rest: Edgar Rice Burroughs, Fritz Lieber, Michael Moorcock, Jack Vance, Carl Edward Wagner, another very well known and competent Robert E. Howard protege without actually having literally worked with him, but certainly a follower of it. And then, of course, E. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. The book is specifically dedicated to John Eric Holmes, whose revision of Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson's original fantasy role playing game led the foundation for his humble start in this wonderful hobby. And mine was very, very similar with Mulvey. So I was probably maybe 1 year thereafter. Um, you can see the artwork is very impressive. And we're going to go right into chapter one. Now, it's very short chapters, which I kind of like actually, because it allows you to chunk these things out a lot easier when they are this short in number of pages. So, Hyperborea is a role playing game of sword, sorcery, and weird science fantasy. It is played with paper, pencil, dice, imagination. Participants include a referee and one or more players. The referee prepares and presents the adventure material, circumstances, challenges, quests, mysteries, etc., and the players create player characters, PCs, including fighters, magicians, clerics, and thieves. The heroes of Hyperborea game delve dungeons filled with horrifying monsters, lethal traps, and bewildering puzzles. They explore savage wilderness frontiers and dangerous borderlands. They probe ancient ruins and investigate cursed tombs. They match steel against sorcery and sorcery against steel, and they plunder for gold, gems, and magical treasure. Hyperborea is a flat Earth realm hemmed in, by the mystical Boreas, northern wind or north wind, and under the scarlet light of a bloated, dying sun. Its rolling seas spill eternal over the world's rim. This world is in a perpetual state of decay and is populated by disharmonious men and women, hostile monsters, and weird alien beings. The setting is adaptable and can be used independently or in conjunction with the milieu, published or homebrewed indeed. Hyperborea might be just beyond the north wind of any campaign setting. What is role playing? Role playing game. Let's see if they have this correct here. I'm sure that they will. A role playing game is a collaborative and interactive experience shared among two or more persons. Traditionally, the game's participants are proximate to one another, seated at a dinner table or the like, But modern communication technology allows individuals to game together even separated by vast distances. A gaming session may last 2 or more hours and can continue into subsequent sessions of play, much like the episodic flow of a television series. The role of a referee. The role of the referee represents or presents the adventure scenario, including any pertinent background information, intelligence, and rumors that may be learnt by the player characters. The game progresses as a sort of dialogue betwixt the referee and the players. The referee describes the places explored: an ancient tower, a ruined city, a dungeon complex, or perhaps a hoary wilderness. Also encountered are humans, humanoids, monsters, friendly and hostile alike. Role for the players. The players react to the referee's descriptions by explaining how their characters, individual or as a team, respond to each development. Character reactions may involve combat, ability use, diplomacy, problem solving, trickery, or evasion. The referee judges the results of all such activities by using a combination of rules and no small amount of logic, reason, and fairness. Collaboration and creativity in the face of adversity are hallmarks of an enjoyable role playing game experience. What is swords, sorcery, and weird science fantasy? Although its name was not coined until 1961 by Fritz Leiber, sword and sorcery is a type of fantasy action that, as many would agree, was created by Robert E. Howard when he wrote The Shadow Kingdom, published by Farnsworth Wright in the August 1929 issue of Weird Tales magazine. Kull, with a single mighty leap, hurled himself into the room. Two spun, but the blinding, tigerish speed of an attack gave him no chance for the defense or counterattack. Sword steel flashed in the dim light and grated on bone as two toppled backwards, Kull's sword standing out between his shoulders. Kull leaned above him, teeth bared in a killer snarl, heavy brows, a scowl above eyes that were like a gray ice of the cold sea. Then he realized the hilt and recoiled, shaken, dizzy, and hand of death at his spine. For as he watched, Two's face became strangely dim and unreal. The features mingled and merged in a seemingly impossible manner. Then, like a fading mask of fog, the face suddenly vanished, and in its stead gaped and leered a monstrous serpent's head. Before the Shadow Kingdom, there were numerous exciting tales of heroic action, adventure, and action and daring daring do penned by many fine authors. Published in the pages of various fiction magazines, these stories took place in exotic locales, lost worlds beneath the Earth's surface, and sometimes other planets. Some literary scholars aver that this brand of adventure fiction can be traced as far back as the Icelandic sagas. Indeed, the saga of Egil Skallagrimsson fits the mold of many tales that were written several centuries later. So, what exactly is sword and sorcery fiction, and what makes it different from epic or high fantasy? In epic fantasy, the protagonists, typically humans and demi-humans, dwarves, hobbits, elves, etc., who struggle against some dire threat and seek to rid the world of great evil. The style of storytelling is epitomized by the fantastic works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Epic fantasies like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings often span multiple novels with plenty of character building, subplots, and side adventures. In contrast, most sword and sorcery stories are shorter and more personal, featuring a single protagonist who may be of dubious character. The objectives of sword and sorcery protagonists are often materialistic or individually motivated. For example, one might seek a valuable relic from an ancient catacombs, take vengeance on a blood feud enemy of old, or perhaps fall into misadventures on account of drunkenness or being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Many sword and sorcery tales are self contained one shots, whilst others are episodic, loosely strung together, and not necessarily in chronological order. However, longer form sword and sorcery tales do exist. Howard's Hour of the Dragon was a serialized Conan novel, and Frank Frazetta's Death Dealer series, written by James Silk, spanned four novels. Epic fantasy worlds tend to be more magical, with schools of wizardry, magical societies, and renowned practitioners of magic who are both feared and admired. In many instances, magic and nature are interwoven, part of the same fabric, if you would. In contrast, the magic of sword and sorcery tales is typically dangerous and or forbidden, and it is often harnessed by madmen. Certainly, Howard's Conan faced several unhinged sorcerers, but the concept of sorcery causing physical and mental corruption to its practitioners is not universally true. Wagner, Kane, Michael Moorcock's Elric, and Fritz Lieber's Grey Mouser are all practitioners of sorcery, and they are neither disfigured nor driven to insanity from it. To Vance's presents several sorcerers in the dying earth, and they are varying temperaments and predelications. And in Ashton Clark Smith's Hyperborea tales, Ivan, although a sorcerer of ill repute, is measured and astute. Detestable sorcerer, abominable here, I arrest you, said Morgie with pontifical severity. Having a hard time reading tonight. Ivan was surprised, not to say startled, but it reassured him to see Morgie was alone. He drew the sword of highly tempered bronze, which he carried, and smiled. That is definitely Cthulhu. I'm not going to continue reading through the passages here. Epic fantasy tales are often conceived out of whole cloth, or with marginal ties to real world history. Entire cultures, races, and species may be invented, many of which are not human yet possess physical and or emotional human characteristics. Quasi medieval feudalistic societies are thematically popular in the genre and typically include a pantheon of deities analogous to the gods of the Greeks, the Romans, and Norse mythologies. Other epic fantasy tales may utilize earthly myths and legends, incorporating them into newly conceived fantasy world. In the Apprentice Adept series by Piers Anthony, for example, unicorns, vampires, werewolves populate the world of Fays. The influence of Tolkien's looms large over countless epic fantasies, and many contain tried and true tropes: elven forests, dwarven mountains, halfling hills, and so forth. In the contrast, the milieu of sword and sorcery are typically populated by humans, though they may have inhuman adversaries, such as the demons that plague the world of Larry Correa's Saga of the Forgotten Warrior. Sword and sorcery worlds usually hew more closely to the familiar, are more likely to have quasi reality, and may exist in variant shades of historical Earth, though with sorcerous elements. This is not to say that sword and sorcery tales are bereft of their own recurrent themes. Certainly, the loincloth wearing barbarian brute can be tedious stereotype. I'm again going to just jump through and see when they start talking. He starts writing about Lovecraft and his influence on the genre as well. Weird science fantasy is not a recognized genre or subgenre of fiction, so if the gentle reader would indulge me, I will explain the intent of our slogan: swords, sorcery, and weird science fiction. Not to be confused with the 1950s EC Comics title of the same name. Weird science fantasy in this context verges closer to the Dying Earth subgenre of science fiction and fantasy in the style of Smith's Zothica and Zothic, and Vance's Dying Earth. These stories take place in the far-flung future when the sun is expiring and the end of days is nigh. In the context of Hyperborea game, weird science fantasy is intended to evoke the spirit of sword and sorcery tales that incorporate technological artifacts from a bygone age of science, possibly of alien or extra dimensional origin. I just need to take a little breather and sip. The addition of weird science fantasy opens unconventional vistas of sword and sorcery content in a world of swords, sorcery, and weird science fantasy. A cache of high tech weaponry may lie buried under the ruins of a city laid to waste millennia ago. Perhaps the cache contains radium pistols, not unlike the firearms wielded by John Carter of Mars in the science fantasies of Edgar Rice Burroughs. In Wagner's Bloodstone, science and sorcery are intermingled, and Kane utilizes them both. The same is true for the dystopia of Moorcock's Hawkmoon stories, where the lines are blurred between devices of science and artifacts of sorcery. In summary, when we declare swords and sorcery and weird science fantasy, we are attempting to conjure the bleak tone of sword and sorcery setting that is haunted by otherworldly horrors whose interests are incongruent with humanity's existence. A world that is bestrewn with sorcerous artifacts and mysterious technologies from the dark, forgotten age. A world populated by feral beasts and lumbering monsters, a dangerous world where survival alone is considered thriving, a world that is home to astonishing swordsmen and sorcerers, a world like Hyperborea. So, using this book, I pretty much just read you the whole introduction there, and introduction of the work welcomes you to Hyperborea, explains what the role playing game is, informs you of the required material, and provides a brief essay on thus, which is what I just did. So, chapter 2 is going to be character generation, so I would do a totally separate video for that. Uh, Statistics, I may, like I said, these are short chapters, so I may combine some of these up. So, chapter 2 and 3 and 4 may all be in one longer length video. I will check this out and see how it ultimately works out. And then 5 is character background, equipment, sorcery, adventure, combat, and then we get to the appendix. So I can see that this is, or I can kind of predict that this is going to be at least 4 videos in length, and possibly as many as 6 before I pretty much move on. I'm going to shift views before I move out of the player's manual and then start looking at the game master's guide. So I know that was kind of a long read and listen to, so I apologize for that. But I think it's really important to understand the tone that an author is looking to get from his or her role playing game. And I think I usually don't read what their definition of role playing is, but I wanted to do it with this one because ultimately, what I'm going to be looking for as I go through this series of videos and taking a deeper look at Hyperborea third edition, I'm going to be looking for myself internally. I am going to be looking for what makes this game system so special, because it does really hold a special place within the OSR and within independent publishers as well. Uh, I always see this listed at larger cons and even middle conventions. There's always someone running this game system. And even at some of the smaller cons I've been to, with less than 200 people, this game is being run. So it is one of the more popular game systems out there. It is one of the amongst the OSR, it's the one that is universally praised. I've never heard a bad thing about this system, and really looking forward to continuing my deeper dive into it. And I'm not quite sure if this is going to be something that I run at my next convention. I kind of already have my 3 games selected for doing that, but it's certainly something that I will play in a next convention that I go to where it's being run. I will specifically look to play in this game system. So as always, thanks for joining. I hope you like this video. Uh, Questions and comments are always welcome. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and hit the alert button so you know when new videos will drop. We're closing out the end of a weekend. I went to a convention yesterday, had a real good time there. So it was an excellent experience. You can check my last video and see a little bit about the exchange that I had with the game master that ran his own game system, and I will get to talking about that separately in another video during this upcoming week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen sometime soon. And hopefully, just like yesterday, really out of the blue, somebody reached out and said, "Hey, there's a local con. If you can come, I'd love to meet you in person." And it was a great experience. And I have other cons coming up. I'm going to be looking for other conventions to attend. And I look forward to seeing you even more so in person at a gaming table sometime in the near future. So thanks for joining. Have the great rest of your weekend. And as always, just keep on gaming out there and have a good night.